All right, part 2 of the Ask Me Anything for June 2018. Cleefus McDonald asked your thoughts on Lil Creed fighting Drago Jr. He's talking about Creed 2, obviously, man. Look, I know I'm going to trigger some of you guys. I didn't love Creed. I know a lot of people absolutely love the film. For me, there's just things about it that didn't work. So I'm not crazy excited to see the second one. I'll probably get vouchers to go see it. I'll probably get some promotional voucher or something, and me and Tiffany will be able to go see it for free. So we'll go see it when we have time, once that happens. But I already know the outcome. We already know he's going to beat Drago, right? We already know what's going to happen there. Here is some of the issues I have with the first Creed. Think back to the original Rocky. He lost to Apollo Creed in that first Rocky. He didn't win until the second Rocky. Creed goes from, and I'm talking about Creed Jr., I can't remember what his first name was, goes from being a complete amateur, to fighting for a world title in 5 minutes, and that doesn't happen. People who come to the sport late are at a much, much higher disadvantage. And you have to work for years to get into that position. And I understand it's a movie, they're going to play some things up, but there were just too many things. Even the opening scene with him, I think he was in Mexico or something, taping himself up, gloving himself. There was no commission people around. That is such bullshit. It was just so unrealistic. And another thing I hated about that movie, everyone was undefeated. Everyone, every opponent, everyone he fought was undefeated. The whole point of Rocky is, at least one of the things I got from the original Rocky movies was, it's okay to lose sometimes. It's how you rebound from those losses and what you do after you get knocked down. And we just didn't get that with Creed. It was just a very millennial, very truncated, fast version of what's supposed to happen. So yeah, I'm not crazy excited. Creed's going to beat Drago. And some people will love it. Cool. They'll probably keep making those movies, man, because they're bringing in another generation and another demographic into those movies. John Gwynn asks, how well do you think the winner of the Cruiserweight World Boxing Super Series tourney will fare in the heavyweight division? So you're obviously asking about Alexander Usyk, Murat Gassiev. To me, Gassiev has more upside in that regard, and I'll tell you the biggest reason why. Age. I think he's 24 right now. Usyk is already 31. So Usyk is already grown into his man mass to a degree. He's going to have to bulk up as a grown man to be at heavyweight. Gassiev, by the time he's 31, he won't be able to physically make Cruiserweight anymore. He won't be able to do it. He will be a natural heavyweight. He won't be the biggest heavyweight, but he will be a natural heavyweight. So I think he has more upside. I also think Gassiev punches with more power. Usyk is more skilled. He's lighter on his feet. He's got better angles and everything else. Gassiev has more of what I would call a pro style in that he sits down his punches more and makes them count. Gassiev will go as far as his chin takes him in the heavyweight division. But we got to see these two fight already. And I know Gassiev has already sparred with Deontay Wilder several times. How do I know that? Because I interviewed him. Go to my interview playlist once again and watch that interview, and he talks about that. Also, John asked, which win would be bigger from a pound-for-pound point of view? Naoya Inoue winning all 4 belts in the World Boxing Super Series at bantamweight, or Loma beating Mikey Garcia, or Terrence Crawford beating Errol Spence, or Golovkin with a definitive KO over Canelo, or Joshua with a KO over Wilder? Good question, but those are a lot of fights to compare. Honestly, brother, it would depend on when and where they fought and where each fighter was ranked pound for pound at the time. So and also how the knockout happened. I mean, if you're talking, let's say Joshua Wilder. Let's say Joshua just connects with a right hand in the first round. I don't think this would happen, but let's just say knocks Wilder out, spark out, boom, first round knockout. That's decisive. That's definitive. But is that a pound-for-pound schooling of a fighter? No, it's a concussive one-punch knockout. Now, if Joshua dominates and brutally knocks out Wilder after outboxing him for 7 or 8 rounds, that's pound-for-pound type shit. You see what I'm saying? What Lomachenko did against Guillermo Rigondeaux, what he did against Jorge Linares, those were pound-for-pound performances because you are a smaller guy, in the case against Linares, stopping a bigger guy. You are outskilling, outwilling, and outclassing, in the case against Rigondeaux, a very, very high-level, elite, pound-for-pound rated fighter. So, if Loma and Garcia fight, and by the time they fight, they're both, you know, like Lomachenko's #1 right now. If Garcia actually does something to get himself unanimously up in the #3, #4 rating, pound for pound, the winner of that fight, that's probably the best win in boxing. But by the time Crawford and Spence probably fight, who knows if Lomachenko will even be still fighting, right? So it's all about timing and when these guys fight. Right now, based on accomplishment and everything that you're saying, I think the biggest pound-for-pound win would be Lomachenko and Garcia. Right now. A year from now, 2 years from now, completely different story, brother. Fricky92 asks, who do you think would have won if Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe fought each other in their prime? That's easy. Lennox Lewis. He already beat him in the amateurs in the 1998 Olympics in Seoul, and Bowe wanted no piece of him in the pros. Lennox Lewis all day. Riddick Bowe, very good heavyweight, but gets overrated in my opinion. He gets overrated. Bazhan Amantev asks, who is your current idol? The person you admire the most? Who is your idol growing up? Who served as a role model to you? You know, I'm going to give you probably a pretty disappointing answer, but I never really had an idol in my life. The only person I ever really idolized was my father because of just the things he's gone through and the sacrifices he's made. This man worked, you know, 2 full-time jobs at different times, and then he'd get up in the morning at 4 in the morning, go downtown, plow snow for the city of Detroit, come home, eat breakfast, and go to work. And then he'd come home, and on the weekend or at nights, he'd do odd jobs, fixing people's cars and stuff like that. Just the sacrifices he made. My father was my idol. But as far as like idolizing an actor or an entertainer or something, it never really happened. But there are plenty of people I admire for things that they do, for things they accomplish. And there's people that, you know, like I might admire one particular accomplishment they have, or one particular thing they stand for, while not necessarily admiring everything about them. That's why I don't idolize anybody. But right now, the people I call the new intellectuals are people that I really admire and look at a lot. Guys who are trying to do new things in media and trying to share ideas with people in an independent way outside of the mainstream media. Guys like Joe Rogan, who is by no means an intellectual, but he brings intellectuals on his podcast and he discusses ideas, some ideas that are very controversial to people and outside of the mainstream narrative, the mainstream news that you see on CNN, HBO, Comedy Central, Hollywood. That's all the news now, right? That's all entertainment and news all together. And Rogan will express ideas on this podcast that's outside of that. I really admire and look at what Rogan is doing, and I'm like, man, that's really cool. I really look up to that. And guys like Richard Dawkins, Hitchens, Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, even Dave Rubin. Again, I don't agree with everything they say or everything they stand for, but some of the ways they present ideas and things that they bring up in an intellectual way, free of the typical dogma of mainstream media and the groupthink and all of that. I really look up to that, and I really look to guys like that to watch and learn from in a lot of ways. So hopefully that gave you a pretty good answer, brother. James Lopez asks, does Triple G stop Canelo or drop Canelo in the rematch post-PED Canelo? And does Canelo have the power to hurt Triple G at the same time in the rematch? Also, he has Jaime versus Liam, Jaime Munguia versus Liam Smith. If he stops Liam Smith, is he the next Mexican superstar? Okay, so for Canelo Golovkin, I'll talk a lot more about that fight in videos coming up, right? And I'm actually working on a piece for Boxing Monthly right now, so I'll be talking to, I know I'll be talking to Loeffler and the Golovkin side, hopefully Golden Boy. I'm not their favorite person right now, but they'll work with me, and then I'll get to talk to Eric and Oscar and all those guys, so I'll have some more insight. But I'll tell you right now, I think that's going 12 again. And maybe there's a flash knockdown, maybe somebody gets hurt this time, but there's a lot of bad blood. I think there's going to be actual blood in this fight, but it's probably going 12 again. That's my gut feel, okay? For Munguia, he's only 21. He's massive for the junior middleweight division. He is going to be a middleweight that soon. He's going to beat Smith. He's going to defend that title a couple times, especially if he's allowed to in Mexico, where he can do whatever he needs to do to cut weight. But once he's trying to get more money and move up in status, he's going to have to fight here in America in our commissions. He's going to have to move up to middleweight. And there are so many great fights that can be made at middleweight that involve that kid. I'm telling you guys, man, boxing from like 140 to really 175 right now has so much up-and-coming talent from different parts of the world. If these guys end up fighting each other, we're going to be good for the next few years. Trust me. My one concern about Munguia, Zanford Promotions. They haven't built a big superstar yet. And I don't think that they're positioned to do that. I think they're positioned to work with promotional companies like Golden Boy, and Golden Boy builds the superstar. So you know, Munguia, long-term, master English, fight in America more, get on HBO more, free HBO. He'll come cheap right now, and be excited. Do what Gennady Golovkin did. That kid needs to be fighting in Los Angeles as soon as he can. If it means he's got to move up to middleweight to do it eventually, fine, but he needs to be fighting in Los Angeles. That's where he can build himself up. New Hendricks. Do you think Lomachenko's style relies too much on athleticism, so he won't be able to fight the same way when he gets older, like Roy Jones when he lost to Tarver? Loma's style is based on athleticism. He's one of the finest athletes in the sport right now. You could argue he's probably the best overall athlete in boxing right now. I'm not saying he is, but you can make that argument. His style is based heavily on athleticism, but it's also based on extraordinary fundamentals and skills. Remember, this guy had hundreds of amateur fights. So Roy Jones had an amateur career as well, but Roy Jones' style had major fundamental flaws in it. This guy would drop his hands, he would do all kinds of ridiculously stupid things, and you get away with it because he was such a special athlete. Roy Jones Jr. is the best, most athletic, the best athlete I've ever seen in my life in a boxing ring. Ever, in my lifetime. And maybe all time. He's certainly up there. He's certainly up there among the best, the top athletes ever. He got away with everything because of that. Loma's an amazing athlete, but not the level of athlete Roy Jones Jr. was. But he's more fundamentally sound than Roy Jones Jr. was. Now, he got dropped against Linares, but that was mostly because he got lazy and stupid. And he admitted he got caught like that once in the amateurs. It's happened to him before. He was feeling himself a little too much, and he got humbled. If he stays humble and he stays at 135, I think he's going to be fine. I think Loma's downfall is going to be eventually he's going to fight somebody that is just too big for him. And, you know, I can see him possibly getting knocked out at some point if he keeps moving up in weight too much. Komatsuda asks, should Triple G retire if Canelo convincingly beats him? No. No. If Canelo convincingly beats him in his rematch, there's still a lot of big marketable fights for Triple G. And let's say Daniel Jacobs wins that IBF title versus Sergey Derevyanchenko. Well, finish business with him. Go in there and do that rematch. There's all kinds of fights. He could do a homecoming in Kazakhstan. He will fight on for several more years, win, lose, or draw against Canelo. Devin Cruz asks, what's your opinion of clinching in boxing? Should there be stricter rules and enforcement? So clinching is a natural part of boxing, and actually if you look at historical fights and you go back and watch fighters like Jack Johnson, and even Ali for that matter, but especially back in Johnson's era, Marciano's era, Lewis's era, those guys, Dempsey, there was a ton of straight up grappling. It wasn't even clinching, it was grappling and mauling and wrestling that was allowed back then. Now, clinching is seen as, it's supposed to be illegal, but there's some clinching that can be tactical. You look at what Lennox Lewis, Vladimir Klitschko were able to do in the heavyweight division with clinching, and other fighters. Bernard Hopkins would never have had the success he had without clinching. Floyd Mayweather wouldn't have been anywhere near what he became without clinching over the last 10 years of his career when he moved up in weight. So there is a tactical aspect to it. And naturally, two guys coming forward, you're going to tangle up. You're going to clinch. When you're hurt, you clinch. It's what you're supposed to do. Those are tactical things, right? It's another part of boxing. It's every bit as much a part of boxing as footwork, angles, spacing, all those things. In fact, you can use clinching to get yourself angles and spacing. There are ways you can clinch a guy up top. You can pin his arms down. You can push off with your knee. You can put your knee inside and push off on him and get a little bit of distance and then get a shot off and get away. There's ways you can use clinching in a tactical way in boxing that makes a lot of sense. Then there's egregious clinching. Then there's dudes that are just flat out not even boxing anymore. They're just wrestling. Now that's the part of it where I think refs should take more points, and there should be stricter rules about it. It's up to the ref to do something about it. And if the ref isn't helping you and you're a fighter fighting a guy who's doing that, you're not getting any help from the ref. You got to take matters into your own hands. You can't just bitch about it later on. You got to do everything in your power, and that means you might have to get nasty and dirty in there to counteract that clinching. So that's just the way it goes, brother. But clinching is always going to be a part of boxing. Always. It's every bit a part of boxing as punching is. But there's tactical clinching, and then there's over-the-top clinching. Naiman Musin asks, before Triple G, oh brother, you asked a long question, but I'm going to truncate that. He asked Triple G, before he started working with Abel Sanchez, he moved his head, he moved his body, he was always bobbing, he used the ring more, and he talks about this for a while, in that he's basically asking, do I think Abel Sanchez is one of the most overrated trainers, and do I think Golovkin would be better if he worked with a better coach? So I don't think Abel Sanchez is an overrated trainer, because look at his track record. And look at his track record right now. Look what he's done with Murat Gassiev and other fighters. But no, I don't think that he's overrated at all. Golovkin's style has changed. Remember, Golovkin had hundreds of amateur fights. And when he first went pro, he fought a little bit more like an amateur. As he's matured as a professional fighter, he fights more professional style. He sits down more on his punches. He stalks more. He's got his feet under him, planted more. Now, I do think he could bob his head a little bit more. He can move his head a little bit more. But Golovkin's whole approach to boxing is to always be in position to punch. And a lot of times, if you're moving your head too much, if you're dipping and diving a little bit too much, you're leaving yourself in a position where you can't counter. And that's what so many of the quote-unquote slick fighters, that's how they lose fights on the cards, because they just don't punch hard enough to win over the respect of the judges. Everything Golovkin does in a boxing ring when it comes to offense and the way he moves is with purpose. He's not just moving just because. You see a lot of guys moving around and bobbing and stuff. It's just nervous energy. They're not really doing anything with it. It's just wasted energy, wasted movement. Everything Gennady does is purposeful. It's the same thing with Gassiev. And that's the style Sanchez has put into Golovkin. So that is part of it. But look, man, that Mexican style that in your question you're saying you don't like, yes, it's a marketing ploy to appeal to Mexican-American fans in Los Angeles. Well, that's a smart thing to do. Does Golovkin really fight a Mexican style? No, he really doesn't. He fights more of an Eastern European style, which makes a lot of sense. But the stalking and the praying and the hard punching Fans like that. And his string of knockouts over, it was B-level opposition, it wasn't all A-level opposition, but his string of knockouts on HBO and coining the Mexican-style phrase was part of his marketing, and it's part of what made him a star, dude. Now, as far as him not moving around as much and everything, dude, he's 36. His style's changing. You have to adapt and adapt your style as you change and adapt as an athlete, as your body changes. And he's also fighting better opposition. His last 2 fights were against Daniel Jacobs and Canelo Alvarez. That's the number 2, number 3 best middleweight in the world. So when you're fighting the number 2, number 3 guy in your division, and they're both a lot younger, a lot bigger and stronger than you naturally, you know, you're not going to look as good as you looked early on in your career against lesser opposition. So I think that Abel Sanchez has done a very good job with Gennady. I've been in Big Bear. Gennady's invited me into the ring before during public workouts, but I've been there seeing those guys work and seeing the interaction between them and the way Golovkin runs camp and the way he works and the way all the other fighters there look up to him. There's a good thing going on there in Big Bear, brother. I don't think Gennady Golovkin would be anywhere near where he is in the sport right now if he didn't meet Abel Sanchez and had never stepped into that gym, the Summit, up in Big Bear. And I say that with 100% meaning and truthful in my heart. I really, really, truly believe that because I've seen the way those guys all work together. Abel's actually been a benefit to Golovkin, brother, not a hindrance. John Harrison asked, how do I get a hold of an authentic Triple G baseball cap in Kazakhstan's colors while living in Australia? ShopGGG.com. Which, by the way, on that website, there's Hublot or Hublot. I don't know how the hell to say it. Those Hublot watches, $45,000. So you can get your very own Triple G Hublot watch for $45,000. Go on, guys. I know you're going to rush to go buy that. But there's also hats and shirts and all that up there. Jose Garnillo asked, do you feel Mikey Garcia is avoiding Lomachenko by expressing his desire to fight Spence after Easter? And he's basically asking, do you think Mikey would rather lose to Spence, a bigger fighter, than lose to Loma? Because it would probably look better because he'd have an excuse. Kind of like when Amir Khan lost to Canelo Alvarez is what he's saying here. Look, I think Mikey Garcia just talks a bunch of shit with the YouTuber guys who I talked about, I think in part 1 of the series, that just shove a camera in people's faces and ask inane questions. They just have conversations while they're hanging out at the store or hanging out shooting some hoops or whatever it is, hanging out at the gym. And I just think he says shit. And people take this, boxing scene and stuff will take this stuff. There's a guy, Kevin Riddick. I've talked, look, I'm just going to put his name out there. Does a really, really good job, but he posts 15 articles a day and 12 of them are clickbait. He will take a little quote from something like that and boom, it's an article on boxing scene. So you see stuff that this dude, Mikey Garcia, just says to get his name out there that's printed. 99% of it is pure bullshit. Mikey Garcia wants no part of Errol Spence. No part of it. No part of him. Do I think the Lomachenko fight will happen? Yes, I think it's very possible. But Mikey Garcia is going to have to play ball with Top Rank. And he pounded them in the ass one time with no lube. So he's going to have to really be willing to work with those guys. And Grandpa Bob, if anyone can hold a grudge, it's Bob Arum. He's probably holds a grudge more than anybody in boxing. That's one of his greatest flaws. We'll see how that works out. James Burrell asked, do you trust Compubox? To a certain degree, yes, I do. Check out my interview with Bob Canobio, the president of Compubox. They've done studies, they've gone back and watched fights and done some trending analysis, and generally speaking, they're within the 90-something percentile of accuracy. Do they get it right all the time? No. Are there flaws? Absolutely. Could they track a better variety of punches? Do I think every punch that isn't a jab is a power punch? Hell no. There are jabs that are more powerful than some straight right hands. Not every punch is created equal. So I think that there are better ways they could do it, and they are exploring different technology. Check out my interview with him. Generally speaking, I think punch numbers are a good indication of what you're seeing in the ring, but they're just one of many indicators. So you can't take him as gospel, but it's a statistic. It helps. And I think that it's part of the whole picture of what you're seeing in a fight. So overall, I like Compubox. He also asked, what is the LDBC trying to accomplish? I don't know, bro. White genocide, I guess? All right, that's it for this piece. I'll post another one tomorrow, guys.